So the thing that I love most about fly fishing, surprisingly, has nothing to do with fish, has nothing to do with rods and reels or even the river or the gear you can get or these, the little flies that you can tie. It has nothing to do with that, although it's great. I love fishing. There's nothing more exhilarating than researching a fish, trying to figure out how to catch a fish, and then trying to do it for a long time, and all of a sudden you get that fish that you've been targeting forever. There's no better feeling than that. And so don't get me wrong, I love fishing for a lot of reasons, but I think the main reason, the number one reason that I love fly fishing is that it's an opportunity for me to disconnect from the world and connect with God. And there's something about being knee deep in a river with a rod in your hand that just makes connecting with God so easy. And I think the reason for that, when you really get down to it, is that when you're in nature, whether you're hiking or fishing or camping or whatever it is, when you're out there in God's creation, it's almost like you can see God all around you. Matter of fact, Romans 1:22, or take it back, Romans 1:20 talks about that exact thing. It says, "For his invisible attributes, that is, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen since the creation of the world, being understood through what he has made. As a result, people are without excuse." And there's something to that. We can see God in his creation. Think about it like this. If I were to go to an art museum and look at a painting, I can see the painter within his painting. What I mean by that is this. There are entire forensic teams that are designated to telling the difference between counterfeit paintings and real paintings. And the way they do that is by looking at the brush strokes and looking at the lines that they make and how they do the colors and all that, all kinds of stuff. But they're able to say this counterfeit was made by some random person, and this is the one that's made by the true, authentic, original painter. You can see the painter within his painting. Same thing with sculpting. It's almost as if every time you hit your hammer against your chisel, it's almost as if you're leaving your fingerprints on the sculpture. And so you can see the sculptor through his masterpiece. Another common example is every time a mother and a father have a baby, everybody looks at the baby and, oh wait, he looks just like his father. I can see his father in his own face, or that baby has his mother's eyes. And it's no different with God and his creation. It's almost as if God's fingerprints are all over creation. We can see God in the lightning as it zips through the sky. We can see his beauty and his handiwork in the rivers that he winds through the countryside. We can see the love that he has for his people when we look at how a mother bear cares for its cubs. We can see God's wrath and God's might in earthquakes or volcanoes, and we can just see God all throughout creation. So of course, whenever we're knee deep in a river with a rod in hand, of course, we can see God more clearly because we're not surrounded by the man-made nonsense. And for me, it's how I've always gotten rid of anxiety or stress for a long time. I'll say this. In 2020, 2020 was a hard year for a lot of people. For me, it had nothing to do with COVID. It had more to do with the riots. At that point in my life, I was working full-time as a youth minister and part-time as a deputy sheriff. And I'll never forget, I got the call from my sergeant. He would never call me, so I thought it was peculiar. We just got our AC fixed, and I got this call from my sergeant. And he said, "Hey, I just want to let you know. I want you to hear it from me before you hear it from somebody else. There are 2 cops who are trapped on the bridge, surrounded by protesters. They're not letting them off the bridge. Pray for them, but also they're rioting in the city, in our own city. And this weekend we'll probably have to go downtown and help deal with it." And I was in shock. Like, what in the world? Just pure, total shock. And so I went inside, and I remember I turned on the TV, and sure enough, there it was on the news. On 6th and Jefferson in Louisville, which is right in front of the sheriff's office where I worked. There's the mayor's office. There's a courthouse where I worked a lot. There's the riots. And you got these lines of police officers lined up, and then you got these rioters who are burning picnic tables and park benches, and they're throwing Molotov cocktails at cops and shooting fireworks at cops, and it's just chaos. And I remember thinking at that moment, I will go downtown and have to be in the middle of this to some degree. And as the weeks and months went by of these riots throughout not just Louisville but the entire country, I remember just being at such a high level of stress, knowing that each weekend I will be down there in the middle of it. The hardest thing that I've ever done is kiss my wife and my oldest child goodbye, knowing that I'm going downtown to deal with all that. The hardest thing I've ever done. Because I felt like there was such a big target on my back and on the backs of all my friends, and just such a chaotic scene, such a dangerous scene to be involved in. And it's just such a stressful thing to deal with. I remember being immersed in the news. It's like I was baptized in the news. And every single day I was just constantly watching and saying, what crazy thing happened today? And it's weird. I knew I should turn it off. But I felt like if I did, I was betraying my friends who were in the middle of it every single day. And it got to a point where I was so stressed, so anxious constantly, that one day I looked at my wife and was like, I got to go fishing. That sounds weird. I know I don't fish a ton. At that time I didn't. I don't fish a ton, but I just got to go fishing and clear my head. So I did. And I've always said that it was the best day of fishing that I've ever had, but I never caught one single fish. And the reason for that is because it wasn't about the fish. When I was out there fishing, it was just me and God, and I laid all my stress, anxiety, anger, frustration, confusion, I laid it all at his feet and just said, God, you're going to have to take it. I don't know what to do with it. I don't know how to handle this. I need your help. And it was at that point that I realized that I could use fishing as a release of anxiety, I could use fishing as a way to connect with God again. And then Riverside was born. Riverside was born out of a need. Riverside was born after seeing the effects of fishing on my life. So today's passage is about anxiety, and specifically with this passage, it's about anxiety surrounding your basic needs, surrounding having your basic needs being met on a day-to-day basis. This is Luke chapter 12, verses 22 through 34. And before we get into it, it's kind of a strange passage. It's kind of a strange text because it's about anxiety. It's about your needs and all these different, it's about all that. But the answer has nothing to do with that. The answer is simply your perspective. And that's such a Jesus thing, That's such a Jesus thing. Jesus constantly calls us to shift our perspective. He constantly calls us to shift our perspective from our own worldly, finite, mortal perspective to a perspective that sees the world through his eyes. And so we're going to get into it. This is Luke chapter 12, verses 22 through 34. By the way, if you hear the mic go mute like this, that means that I'm probably coughing. All right, there's nothing wrong with your internet. Probably it's probably just me. I've been dealing with allergies, and my voice is gone from Bible camp. Anyways, Luke chapter 12, 22 through 34. Here goes. Then he said to his disciples, "Therefore I tell you, don't worry about your life, what you will eat, or about the body, what you will wear, for life is more than food, and the body more than clothing. Consider the ravens. They don't sow or reap. They don't have a storeroom or a barn, yet God feeds them. Aren't you worth much more than the birds? Can any one of you add one moment to his lifespan by worrying? If then you're not able to do even a little thing, why worry about the rest?" Then he continues, verse 27. "Consider how the wildflowers grow. They don't labor or spin thread, yet I tell you, not even Solomon in all his splendor was adorned like one of these. If that's how God clothes the grass, which is in the field today and is thrown into the furnace tomorrow, how much more will he do for you, you of little faith? Don't strive for what you should eat and what you should drink, and don't be anxious, for the Gentile world eagerly seeks all these things, and your Father knows that you need them. But seek his kingdom, and these things will be provided for you. Don't be afraid, little flock, because your Father delights to give you the kingdom. So sell your possessions and give to the poor. Make money bags for yourselves that won't grow old, an inexhaustible treasure in heaven where no thief comes and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Now this passage comes on the heels of the parable of the rich young fool. I apologize. The parable of the rich fool. And the whole point of that is basically don't focus on the things of this life while neglecting the things of the next life. Don't focus on the things of this life while neglecting to focus on the things of the next life. If you want to go watch that, it was Sermon 3. It's just in my archives. But if you notice in verse 22, the very beginning of today's text, then he said to his disciples, therefore, pause. Therefore. Anytime you see therefore in Scripture, that means you need to look back to see what he's talking about. It's almost like he's saying this, like a whole bunch of stuff here, and therefore, because of that, this. So this comes on the heels of the parable of the rich fool about the don't store up treasures on earth, but treasures in heaven. And so he says, therefore, I tell you, don't worry about your life, what you will eat, or about the body, what you will wear, for life is more than food and the body more than clothing. Now pause for a second. I want you to realize Jesus isn't telling this to people like us. I can open up my refrigerator and I've got plenty of food. We've been eating clean lately. It's been our big thing lately. He's trying to start eating clean and live that lifestyle. But got plenty of strawberries, plenty of grapes, got steaks in there. We got chicken, we got pork chops, we got dairy products. We got milk and stuff called kefir. I'm not even sure how to say it. Kefir. Somebody tell me in the comments. I don't know. It's like a liquid yogurt. Think Danimals, but flavorless. You got to put your own fruit in it to make it flavorful. Anyways, we got not that you need to know what's in my fridge, but we got all kinds of stuff in our refrigerator. We don't lack in that department, right? And if I go to my closet, I can open up my closet. I can pull out a wide variety of clothes of different styles, for different occasions, for all kinds of stuff. I don't lack in that department. So he's not saying this to people like us where we have all this excess stuff. He's saying this to people who, if they wanted food, they had to go harvest it and plant it and work for it, or they had to go kill it and, salvage it and cook it. It was totally different. And they probably didn't have an excess of clothing like we do today. They probably had one or two pairs of clothing that they wore, and that was about it. So these are pretty big needs that they need to find. They really need to find food. They really need to find a clothing. These are serious needs that are met. We take this stuff for granted. They didn't. So he's telling them, don't worry about your life, what you will eat, or about the body, what you will wear, for life is more than food and the body more than clothing. Then he pauses. He says, consider the ravens. And what's interesting about that word consider is it's not a passive consideration. It's not this, oh, look over there, there's birds, look at them for a second and then come back. It means to observe, to get a deep understanding of, to ponder. So observe the ravens. They don't sow or reap. They don't have a storeroom or a barn, yet God feeds them. Aren't you worth much more than the birds? And whenever I read that, my mind goes directly to Exodus and the Israelites. You got the story where the Israelites are under Egyptian captivity, they're slaves, and it's this terrible thing. And God tells Moses with the burning bush, go free my people and let my people go. And so Moses does. Got all the plagues and all that stuff, and then the Red Sea parts, which these stickers, if you want to buy one, the design was inspired by the Red Sea. Just DM me, I'll send you one. But anyways, there's a shameless plug. What am I doing? Why are you, what is that? Regardless, You got that story, and then you have the Egyptian or the Israelites. They're wandering through the wilderness. They're just wandering through the wilderness, and one of their first needs that they needed was food. Like, we're hungry, we're starving, we need food, and so God sent them manna and quail. Quail is like the bird, the bird, and then manna was like this dew that would form in the ground, and then they could go get it. It was like this flaky substance, kind of like bread. And what was interesting about it is he told them basically like, do not hoard this, do not store this up. Like, don't build up a little stockpile for the next few weeks. Don't do that. When you go to get this food, when you go to get this manna, go out and get enough for today, and that's it. And if I'm not mistaken, somebody actually eventually tried to store it up and build a little stockpile, and it all went bad. It all rotted. And it's like, why? Why would God tell them? And they think about it, they're in the middle of the wilderness. Food's not abundant. Like, why would God tell them, hey, like, don't store up food? They need food. Well, the reason is because God's trying to get them, he's trying to teach them a lesson. Don't rely on yourselves, just rely on me. Trust me. I'm going to take care of you. Just trust me. Think about it. I just brought you out of Egypt. You just saw 10 plagues, dude. Like, you just saw me do the most amazing things you could possibly think of. I split the Red Sea in half. Like, that's insane. Just trust me. I'm going to take care of it. That's the lesson he's trying to teach the Israelites. I'm going to take care of it. For life is more than food and the body more than clothing. Consider the ravens. They don't sow or reap. They don't have a storeroom or a barn, yet God feeds them. Aren't you worth much more than the birds? And the thing about the birds is they're just doing their bird thing. They're just living their life. They are instinctively doing what birds naturally do. And that's something that just blows my mind about creation, about animals. Think about like mammals. When a baby is like a baby mammal, let's say you have like a baby, I don't know, pig or something, a goat. So you have a baby goat and it's born. It instinctively knows to feed off of its mother, to go to its mother for food. It doesn't have to be taught that. It just knows right off the bat, that's where I get food. And so there are things that these animals are doing that they're just designed to do. And so the first thing that I want you to think of as we go throughout this text is to simply do what you're designed to do. Just do what you're designed to do. Now the question is, what are we designed to do? What am I designed to do as a human? What is humanity designed to do? What are we here for? And the best way that I know how to answer this question is to go back to Genesis 1 and 2. And it's the creation story. You got this story where God creates, the trees and the grass and the oceans and the fish and the animals and the sky and the space, like all that stuff. He creates everything. Then he creates man. And if you look in the text, it's like, man, what did they do in these early days of life? Well, they walked with God. They talked with God. Adam and Eve, they talked with God. They just lived their life with God, and God gave them some jobs, and they did that, which is really just a glorification of God through obedience. They obeyed God, and they just loved God. They lived a life with God. That's what our purpose is. Let me make no mistake, dude. Like, whether you're Hindu or Islam or Christian or atheist or whatever it is, your purpose in life is to glorify the one true God, the creator of the heavens and the earth. That's your purpose in life. We should understand that and then live our lives based off that knowledge. Our goal in life, our purpose is to glorify the one true God. When we spend all our time focusing on the things of the world, what we're going to eat, what we're going to, what we're going to have for clothes, our basic need, like when we focus on all that, we're missing the big picture. And that's the point that he's making here in this text. We're missing the big picture, guys. If we're spending all of our time, like keep in mind this comes on the heels of the parable of the rich fool. If we're spending all of our time building up storerooms and barns and trying to take care of our future and trying to be comfortable life, if we're doing all this, we're focused on the excuse me, if we do all this, we're focused on the wrong thing. We're focused on the wrong thing. We need to do what we're designed to do. We need to glorify God in our lives, walk with Him, talk with Him, spend our lives glorifying Him, worshiping Him, obeying Him. That's what we're designed to do. We're not designed to stress about what we're going to eat today. We're not designed to stress about having our basic need. We're just designed to glorify Him. Almost as if God's saying, you focus on that, what you need to focus on, the important thing, I'll take care of the rest. You focus on God, I'll take care of the basic needs. Relax, don't worry about it. Your perspective needs to change. You focus on the kingdom, I'll focus on the earth. I'll take care of you. It's the same lesson He taught in Exodus. It's the same lesson He's teaching now. He continues on. Aren't you worth much more than the birds? Can any one of you add a moment to his lifespan by worrying? If then you're not able to do even a little thing while worried about the rest. Then he continues on, consider how the wildflowers grow. They don't labor or spin thread, yet I tell you, not even Solomon in all his splendor was adorned like one of these. That's how God clothes the grass in the field, which is in the field today and is thrown into the furnace tomorrow. How much more will He do for you, you of little faith? Don't strive for what you should eat or what you should drink, and don't be anxious, for the Gentile world eagerly seeks all these things, and your Father knows that you need them. Pause. The Gentile world eagerly seeks after all these things, and who? Your Father. Your Father knows that you need them. Guys, you got to realize we serve a loving Father. We serve a Father who loves us so much that He sent His only Son to die in our place so that we could have eternity with Him. That's the Father that loves us. That's the Father that we serve. Do you really think that He's going to die on a cross and just then look at your life and say, yeah, like, I don't really care if you don't have the basic needs. I don't care if you survive. I just whatever. I don't care. No, of course not. He loves us. He cares for us. And he does take care of us. That's our Father. I feel like sometimes we have this lofty idea of God where He's like this being out there that has nothing to do with us. Like, no, absolutely not. He's our Father. He loves us as if we are His children. It's what He's revealed to us through the texts. It's an amazing thing. You are the Father's, and He will take care of you. Let's continue on, verse 31. But seek His kingdom, and these things will be provided for you. Don't be afraid, little flock, because your Father delights to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give to the poor. Make money bags for yourselves that won't grow old, and an inexhaustible treasure in heaven, where no thief comes and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be as well. Jesus is calling us to shift our perspective from a perspective of this worldly, mortal perspective to a perspective that sees everything through His eyes, that sees our neighbor and our friends and the people around us through His eyes, that sees His church through His eyes, that sees His creation through His eyes, that sees Himself through His eyes. That's the perspective that God's calling us to. That's the perspective that God wants us to see, because that's the only true perspective. And so when we look at this, again, it goes back to the parable of the rich fool. Don't store up treasures for yourself here on earth. There's an entire eternity to look forward to. There's an entire eternity we should be focused on. Don't neglect that by just focusing on the here and now. Focus on eternity. And so you have this passage where it's almost, when you first read it, you're almost like, is it really that simple? Like Jesus is telling us, like, go look at some birds, go touch some grass, go look at the wildflowers. You'll be all right. It almost feels like this passive, like, just don't worry about it. And in some sense, it almost is, but it's so much deeper. Jesus is calling us to open our eyes. Jesus is calling us to see the world through His eyes. It's why I love the song, Be Thou My Vision, because it's all about seeing everything through His perspective. And so when we think about the anxieties that we have in this life, the things that we're anxious about in this life, we have to realize a few things. Have to realize that there's an eternity after this, like that this life is really nothing in comparison to the eternity that awaits us. We have to realize that we have a God who loves us, who cares for us, who died for us, so that we could have an eternity with him. We have to realize that life is more than food and the body is more than clothing. There's so much more important things to worry about than having our basic needs met. And then, even then, to trust God for them, that God's going to take care of us. He loves us. He's going to take care of us, but we need to be focused on what's to come. Now, next week, we're going to look at verses 35 through 40, which is talking about being ready for the Master's return. It's a really interesting passage, and there's a lot of different ways that people interpret it. I'm going to go kind of just based off the text that we just read and apply that to that passage because it's all the same conversation. But we're going to talk about being ready for the Master's return. In the meantime, think about the things in your life that cause you anxiety. Think about the things in your life that cause you trouble and that trouble your heart, that stress you out, that make you worried. And I'm not trying to belittle them by any means. I don't want to belittle your struggles. They're very real. But I want you to begin thinking about them through the eyes of God. I want you to begin thinking about them with a perspective that is His instead of our own. And once we do that, I think that the anxieties and the troubles and the worries that we have in this life will begin to all of a sudden make sense. It's almost as if our anxieties will be given a purpose. So that's what I want you to think about. Guys, it's always a blessing. And I'll see you next time.